You're listening to The Scoop on Ultrasound, where the world of ultrasound imaging comes alive through dynamic conversations. This episode is brought to you by EDM Medical Solutions. Be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite app so that you never miss an episode. Today, we're joined by Natalie Avni, a certified RDMS and RVT sonographer, department supervisor, and a leading voice in ultrasound education on social media. With over 12 years of experience and more than 1 million followers across TikTok and Instagram, Natalie has made a name for herself by combining clinical expertise with accessible, engaging content for both clinicians and patients. In this episode, we explore ultrasound through the lens of leadership, wellness, and education. Natalie shares her journey into sonography, her approach to creating healthier work environments, and how she's used digital platforms to build a global community. Her impact extends far beyond the exam room, and it's changing the way people see the field.
Quality supplies make a difference. At EDM Medical Solutions, we support over 2,000 healthcare facilities across the U.S. with high-quality medical products built for real clinical needs. From ultrasound imaging accessories to surgical instruments and everyday disposables, our portfolio spans women's health, men's health, and the operating room. We've spent over 35 years helping practices deliver safe, efficient, and cost-effective patient care, with the personal support only a family-owned company can provide. Explore our full range of solutions today at us.edm-imaging.com.
Today, we're talking about ultrasound through the lens of leadership, wellness, and education, but also from the unique perspective of someone who shaped the conversation far beyond the exam room. My guest is Natalie Avni, a certified RDMS and RVT sonographer, department supervisor, and content creator who's become one of the most recognizable voices in ultrasound on social media. With over 250,000 followers on Instagram and more than 890,000 on TikTok, Natalie's educational content is relevant, funny, and accessible to clinicians and patients alike. She demystifies ultrasound, empowers students, and has built a global community on both platforms and others too. Natalie has over 12 years of experience in sonography and is currently a department supervisor at HCA Healthcare in South Florida. Natalie, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your origin story. Not just what led you into ultrasound, but also what's kept you there over these 12 years. Can you tell us a bit about your journey into sonography and what drew you into both patient care and leadership?
So I wasn't always interested in ultrasound. I always knew that I wanted to do something with patient care. I just loved everything about the reward of taking care of someone and just being there for someone. And even at one point, I remember thinking psychology, maybe I can just listen to someone all day and I could just give advice. And I felt like I always had the maturity of knowing what I wanted to do, but it was never really direct. And my story with ultrasound is all because of my sister's pregnancy. I just looked at this amazing, whole amazing thing. And then going into her ultrasound, and I was like, I think this is what I want to do. But I didn't do so great, and I recently shared this, like, as far as, like, prerequisites and doing great with anatomy and physiology, that I thought that that's it for me. If I'm not good at that, then it's probably not for me. And then I got pregnant myself, and that's really what motivated me, and I just went back to school, and that was it for me. As far as leadership and I have a long story with a bad experience that I have gotten through personally in the beginning of my career with leadership. And I think when I got that opportunity, I just grabbed it and I was like, I want to do better for our community. I know what was done wrong and I know what could be done right, that I just want to shape everything because it's so much more than just ultrasound. It's so much more than just caring for the patient. You also work with people for 8 hours a day. And it's so important to not just go with I'm just going into work and that's it. I'm leaving everything. It's not true. You want to be happy where you're at. And I just believed in myself that I could make that healthy work environment and help every single aspect of ultrasound, personal and patient care. So that's really what it was for me.
Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear how you got over that initial barrier, what you said of the prereqs, right? What was necessary education wise, because sonography is complicated. It definitely takes work, right? On the clinical side, also on the book side. I think sometimes maybe people who aren't that familiar don't realize that to be a sonographer is hard in many ways, right? So to hear that, I think is encouraging to anyone who's exploring it as a career, right? Who might maybe they doubt themselves and they think, "God, I don't know if I could do that." It's possible, right? What was one of the key things that you applied, though, to really get over that initial barrier? Did you double down on studying? Did you focus really on what inspired you about the field?
I really think that we can make so many excuses of why something is hard in everything.
Right.
And I feel like I just took my entire, just excuses. This is too hard. Maybe medical is just not for me. Maybe I should stick to something different. And then in all reality, it comes to really being motivated and finding your why. And my why personally was my pregnancy. I knew I was gonna be a mom, like, I wanna do something great with my life, like, enough with the excuses of it being hard. There's always a way. Everyone ends up doing something they love, and you can do it because it's a matter of with ultrasound specifically, anatomy and physiology, it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of finding your way and your technique to studying. And if you don't find what works for you, you're not going to be successful. And it's not, it's individual. Some people are great with like mnemonics. That was me. That was my studying method that I just did great with it. For others, it might be more understanding the depth of it. And there's time for that. The thing with prerequisites, it's very on the surface. And you kind of just need to pass it and move on. Like that's all I always say. Just pass it, get a good grade. I'm not going to say, oh my God, be an A student. Yes, you do need a certain GPA to get into certain programs. It is a competitive program just because the amount of students that enter a program is very small because it is a very warm environment, one-on-one, very something that's very you don't have 100 students in your class. There's maybe 18, 19, 24 at the max. So you wanna work on it, but you also don't wanna sulk in, "Oh my god, I'm not 100% understanding this yet." It's your prerequisites. You'll get to cross-sectional anatomy and physiology, which is way, harder, but at least you're applying it towards scanning. You're applying it towards your career. So there's more to look forward. You just gotta stop making the excuses and say that you can do it because you can. You can do anything if you really and I know it sounds so like corny, but when you really want something and you really like there's no stopping. And that was me. Second time around after failing, I was like, bam, I got it.
No. Determination is key, right? Especially as a clinician. I think the best clinicians are definitely the determined ones, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we see on this show when we have our guests. We see how determined all of them are to succeed and to push forward. That's really what makes the change in patient care. Now, on the outside, ultrasound can look like a calm job. I think, especially as it's portrayed in media, right? You're in a darker room. You're just, oh, they're just sitting there holding a probe, but it's incredibly demanding. And every sonographer listening to this knows that both physically and emotionally. So, what are some of the biggest physical and emotional challenges you face as a sonographer with your experience, and how have you managed them?
So, a physical demand really comes with the, repetitive motion, your wrist, the risk of carpal tunnel, the things that we can get injured with by doing this physical job. And I think speaking about the physical aspect, and I'll talk about this also later on, the boundaries and the limitations of how much you scan and how long you scan for are very important. Being that I've scanned for over 12 years, and thank God I'm still okay. I'm doing great, but it's still hard, and some days I'm just like, "Oh my god," like, remembering to stretch and doing the things that are important to protect, your back, your shoulder, your wrist. There's a lot of things that are very demanding, especially if we go in, just like you said, on the surface, it looks like we're in a dark room, we're taking pictures and, just snap, here's uterus, here's ovary, and oh my god, the amount of things we have to take into account to find those organs sometimes, and pushing through, and the the frustration when we don't find something. I mean, I don't think it's talked about enough. Like, just saying left ovary is not visualized, that is not really a possibility in a lot of practices. There is no such thing. I need you to find that ovary because how am I gonna know that that ovary is, within normal limits or not? So there's more also internal frustration and internal toll where you're like, I need to find this organ and what's going on, or this CAT scan found this mass and I can't find it.
Mm.
Find it. Like this is something that comes into the repetitive motion also. Like I gotta dig, I gotta look through. And that's one thing. The emotional, I think it really does depend where you work. I feel like many times us sonographers have this, stigma of like, we don't have any emotions, we don't care because we don't talk, we don't, there's a lot of things where are taken into account depending where you work. So I worked in a hospital setting and I was not allowed to talk to the patient about what I'm seeing or what I'm looking at, or and to avoid that, because the questions arise normally, I wouldn't talk as much because I would be afraid to, say something that I'm not allowed. You can lose your job. You can, the patient's going to tell a doctor, well, the sonographer told me this and this and that. And then I get in trouble because I gave results. So that's hospital setting and many other settings that are just, it is what it is. We're not allowed. But where I work, it's an OBGYN office. This screen right here is what they see in front of them. I'm actually in my ultrasound room right now. And this is something that most patients know that what they're supposed to see on the screen and what they're not. Even though they don't know what I'm looking at, but they're like, okay, where's the heartbeat, right? So if I'm not showing the heartbeat, they know something's wrong. So here, they do know what's going on. And that emotional toll is something that is very hard no matter what. I know that we're all different. We all have different personalities. Maybe I'm like on the higher end of empathy. So for me, it's very hard many times to disconnect. And this is why patient scan time it's not just about scanning. It's also like I need to decompress before going into a completely beautiful scan then 2 minutes after. So there is a toll that, you take when you care, but it all comes down to still being very rewarding. This job is very rewarding, even in the sad cases. You see them in a better case a few months after. You see them. I've been in the same practice for 12 years. So I see them, trying to conceive, pregnancies, losses, great, great events all around. But it does give you hope because you are there for a very sad scenario. And then all of a sudden, there's a reason why it's called a rainbow, right? All of a sudden, the rainbow's out and everything's good. And I love being that positive person because you also need to be careful with what you say. And that's another thing that's emotionally, you have to kind of like read the room, read the patient. Not everybody wants a hug. Not everybody wants to be like, pat, like, or I'm so sorry. Some people just want to be shut down. And it's something that nobody teaches us. And it's nobody teaches us this. It's something you just grasp with experience. And
Yeah, especially the area that you are in, right? And UN and women's health, there is an aspect where, of course, there's always an emotional toll, right, for the patient, depending on the condition, right? Maybe it's just routine, but other times, patients can be going in because they do have a concern. There's sort of those heightened nerves, and within OBGYN, of course, there's also the heightened sense of when it's a mom who's expectant, there's a baby, right? And now it's two lives that are involved in it, and obviously that takes a toll in itself. We had a guest not too long ago, Lachelle Jones, who is an MFM sonographer, and she spoke to this of how important it is for sonographers in her space specifically, which is, of course, not too far from OB, in her space specifically, to show that patient care, to calm the patient. She talked about having a calming tone, a calming demeanor, and just like her use of herself, sort of as if it was like a sort of therapy, so to speak, therapeutic,
right,
to be able to calm the patient. So I think what you're saying is so true. It's so important to be aware, right? To read the room, as you
right,
said, especially in those situations.
right, right. Because not everybody, let's call it love language, right? Like not everybody has the same. For some it's words, for some it's physical touch, for some it's everything, and it's the same way. Some patients can have everything completely normal, but they're still freaking out before, and that's valid. Just because they see so much on social media now. I mean, before people didn't even know that miscarriages were that common, sadly, let's say. It just happens a lot. And now people know about this. So now they come into this room what if this is what I have because it's so common? So right there, it's so important the initial encounter with the patient and just even if you can't give results, communication is something that you can do. Like, I'm looking at this, I'm taking pictures of this. As soon as I put you back in the waiting room, someone's gonna come and give you results. Like just like being there. And when something bad happens, managing it correctly, not letting her cry in the waiting room. Go get the doctor, go get someone that can answer her, because if this my job title, I mean, I don't have to do that. I can just put her back in the waiting room. That's not
Right.
my job, right?
Mm.
But how do we go past this to give them so much more because they deserve that.
Yeah, excellent patient care for sure. Patient-centered care. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget about the fact that there's a patient, there's a human being there because of how busy we are, right? I think
Right.
every clinician can sense that, right? That when you're so busy, it's like, man, I'm going through all these cases, I'm doing all these things, but at some point, just say what you just mentioned, right? To take a step back and to think, wow, how can I be there? So great. Now, that whole discussion, of course, of the emotional demands, the physical demands, right? All of that involves a need for wellness that naturally leads us into talking about wellness. So, from your perspective, what are some non negotiable practices that you use to stay grounded and to maintain your energy both inside and outside of work?
So let's start with inside of work. I think boundaries with scan time will always be something that I lead with because just as we just spoke about, things like this happen way too often. We also have billing to do, which has to do with here also, right? Just like making sure that everything's done. It's so tedious sometimes, and everything you can make errors very easily. And just like having that time to just sit with yourself for a second. So for me, a non-negotiable thing is a 30-minute time frame per patient if it's GYN or regular OB. An hour for anatomy scans. I'm still stuck in anatomy scans, an hour a must, and no double booking when it comes to biophysical profiles. A biophysical profile is a scan that we really give 30 minutes for the baby to move and do its breathing, its tone, which is like movements of the
Mm.
arms and just movement of the belly, just and measuring fluid, just making sure the baby's not in stress. Visually with ultrasound. We want to make sure the baby practices breathing because they don't really breathe inside. And what we wait for takes time because they don't always want to do it, right? That's why it's called practicing. So for me to just say, yeah, let's add on this patient while someone with a full bladder is waiting in my waiting room, this could take 30 minutes. And then this is where you create a stressful environment, right?
I
So eliminating these things wellness wise at work is that, and making sure that you have a very good work environment that supports that. Outside of work, I've realized that with time, and I'm not gonna be like, "Oh my god, make sure you work 4 days a week." It's not possible when you start. You have to put in the work when you start. You have to take whatever shifts when you start because that's how we all started, and we all have to give it our all, and we can't just be spoiled in the beginning.
Right.
But when you can, I think working 4 days a week, I do 32 hours a week. It's 8 hours, and I feel that that balance is perfect. It gives me 1 day as a mom of 3 especially, it gives me my 1 day where the kids go to school, and it's my time to just do whatever I want, whether it's, also exercising during the week, doing things that you love, that you're passionate about, hobbies. I mean, that day for me is also a day where I create something that's not ultrasound related, and on my social media pages, I do like to share the work-life balance that I have. And, us medical professionals can be and will be professional in our setting, but we can do whatever we like outside that we
Yeah.
like. For me, it might be beaching and pooling and just, also knowing to enjoy my life socially. And I think it's so important to not give up on that because sometimes we can come home so tired. And I remember doing the hospital life. I come home tired. I don't want to go out tonight. I don't want to do date night with my husband. I am just exhausted, and that affects your entire being, and that will make you not like your job because you have no work-life balance. So
And that is so important given the situation that we have in healthcare, in sonography and in other areas where we have a lot of burnout, right? We see so many burnout physicians, I mean, well, physicians and other clinicians, I should say, that are burnt out, they're leaving healthcare, and we need sonographers, we need clinicians, right? We can't be losing them. So I think what you're saying, having that work-life balance is so necessary. And for the people who are starting to remember what you said, that maybe in the beginning it's tough, you got to put in the work, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? There's just a little way you get to a better balance. It might just be the beginning, but everyone pays their dues, so to speak. And then there is another opportunity later on where you can
Sure.
have a balance. So important what you talk about.
If you are high level disinfecting your ultrasound transducer, it's likely you're soaking the probe or using an automated HLD device. But there's a better option out there. TriStel Olds can high level disinfect your transducer in just 2 minutes and costs under $3 per cycle. Sound too good to be true? Request a brochure today and learn why so many practices are switching over to TriStel Olds. Visit us.edm-imaging.com/TriStel. That's TRISTEL. And now, back to the show.
Now, I feel like some sonographers listening to this might hear you and be like, okay, that's great. That idea of, having my boundaries, all of those things. But what if I am in an environment where it's just not that healthy? Advocacy is something we've talked about on this podcast before, a sonographer as an advocate for a healthier work environment. So, how do you think that individual sonographers can begin to advocate for a healthier work environment without fear of pushback, especially in situations where they might be feeling pressure from admins who are above them, who are telling them you need to scan more, you need to hurry up, all of those different pressures that, sonographers are familiar with? What would you say in regards to that?
This has to do with patient care first, because if I don't have time and I'm rushed to getting the next patient, I'm probably not going to be myself as much, right? I'm not going to be as patient, maybe I won't be as calm because my internal feeling is that I am stressed. And also, what about patients complaining? Because when we run behind, there's someone waiting, and that's not a great idea or a good look for the practice. And let me tell you, still, because I speak to a lot of sonographers on a daily, still they don't care. So there's two options. You try. The second option is you leave, because things like this will make you leave your career. And I've seen this so many times. Sonographers leave this job, this career, because to them, all they know is that it's too physical, too emotionally exhausting, and nobody cares. That's that. So
Right.
find a practice that carries. Move on. I know it's hard to change a setting, but you're here so many hours a day. If you're not happy here, let me tell you, it's going to affect your entire life. You're just going to be an unhappy person. And I personally, as a student, have seen sonographers who are burnt out that truly should not be doing this anymore. And the beautiful thing about ultrasound that it's so versatile. You don't have to be with patients anymore. If you're burnt out, you can do so much more. You can sell machines, you can educate students on how to become sonographers, to do so much more. You can be an application specialist working for the machines. There's so much you can do. So if you don't find any good luck with being there in a place where you get a good work-life balance and you can communicate that, th- because it's hard to get through them, then move on. That's my best tip.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think you make a fair point that you advocate up to the point where it's possible, but the truth is some environments simply are not willing to change, right? Because you're not able to bring the change makers on board. But it's definitely important, like you said, to really express that and explain the reasons why, especially if you think perhaps that the management doesn't understand it. And in some situations, it's possible that you could be the person who advocates for change, which is excellent. But in other cases, it just might not be the right fit.
Right.
Now, your impact as a sonographer does go beyond your department. Like I mentioned in the beginning, you've used social media, right, to spread the word about ultrasound. So, what inspired you to start creating that educational content, and how has that shaped your own professional growth?
So I started in the bit well, I started the whole all my pages around COVID. And I really started with just creating medical humor content, kind of like, the things we deal with every day here, and like to shed light on certain situations that to really reach patients and sonographers, because I feel like my content doesn't really only it isn't just for sonographers. It's also because I want the non-sonographer world to understand what we do, to kind of see what we do. And I really started with just like creating funny skits and funny interactions with patients. And then I realized what questions were arising. Like people were actually having questions based on what I created. And I was like, wow, in my head, I'm thinking, people can just go online and get this info. Like, I don't think I should create educational videos. And I realized the need. And I was like, okay, for every funny video, I'm also going to create an actual explanation of why we do this. And this is how I started getting into it. And then I realized the need of a community for sonography, because during that time when COVID started, there was so much negativity because people were really burnt out and people were really upset and sad about the outcomes and what things happening, and people were overworked. And I was like, where are the sonographers? I don't see any ultrasound techs at all. Like it was just like a lot of nursing, a lot of physicians. And I'm like, I think we need to create a community here. And that's really what drove me more into it. And I love being a safe space. I really do, because I realize even teenagers who are afraid to express themselves at home maybe, or ask questions. And even though I don't give medical advice, they'll like ask questions that others are giving them, like, tips on the comment. And all of a sudden my comment section is becoming this community on its own, where other sonographers are helping these, teenagers. Or even here, I'll scan teenagers that have no idea that anything about their cycle, anything about, for instance, what happens in our bodies. And it's like such a good place. And it makes me so happy where people get information about the career, about their general bodies, about human health, just women and human health in general, from this content. So that's really what inspired me.
That's wonderful to hear. It's crazy how just using a medium online like Instagram, TikTok, and any other platforms allow you to form that community, where you are giving advice and you yourself are shedding light on ultrasound. There are so many unknowns, I think, to the general public when it comes to patients, right? When it comes to ultrasound, I think they might know what it's about, many questions about it. And so I think you taking that step is so important. It goes to show, again, another example of advocacy in another way, right, for the field, for the profession. Now, let's go back to the clinical side and your growth into leadership, because leadership is something we talk about a lot on this podcast, since there's more and more sonographers stepping into leadership, looking to see how they can continue to grow. There's organizations that have started to create career ladders, such as the ASE, to promote, right, sonographers moving up into those leadership positions, because there haven't really been formal career ladders before for sonographers. So, can you share more about your journey from clinical sonography into leadership? I know you still scan, but you supervise. So, could you tell us about that? Were there any key people or moments that played an important role in that journey?
Yes. So in my office specifically, first of all, I got recruited by the doctor who owned the practice before we were corporate. We still work together. He's, in our office, but he used to just be the owner of this office. And now we're 3 offices in, by the way. We have 3 locations. So it's like we grew like crazy, and I supervise all 3 locations. And for me, that doctor who recruited me was the person who believed in me. And I always say you only need one person, because yes, my mom, my husband, the greatest cheerleaders, and you can do everything, but you need someone in your field to be like, you got this. And I can proudly say that I was that person to many sonographers who went and grew and left me to, for better opportunities, not because they didn't, enjoy the work setting, because you need that person to be like, you can do it, go for it. And that was him. Um, this doctor saw my hardships with the previous leadership that was here. And it wasn't even a leadership. Before that, it was just lead techs that were here. And just seeing how everything was managed pushed me even more. to wanting this. And I was brought into this position by, I always say by chance, right? I know it's not by chance because obviously, like, I showed what I could do and what I could, after they left, I had to hire. All of a sudden, I'm looking for sonographers, interviewing and hiring because nobody else can do the scan interview, right? I have to be the one to like see. So all of a sudden, I'm in this role and I got the title literally 2 months after. And now I make the schedule. I create the schedule for, all 3 locations. We have a total of 5 ultrasound rooms right now. Um, we work with 12 providers. I feel like going into this role, there's a lot that comes into it. A lot of empathy also for the sonographers,
Mm.
showing equality. You don't want to have favoritism or anything like that. It comes with a lot of responsibility, but a lot of supervising roles financially aren't really worth it, and that's why a lot of people don't step into it. I have gotten an opportunity years ago, and it would have been, working at the hospital. Do you wanna be the lead tech? And then it's like, "Oh, here's $2 extra an hour," right? And I wanna be transparent about that because it does come with a lot, and you have to have a goal. So someone would be like, "It's not worth it," but I think it is because A, you're growing in every aspect. You're growing your skills, you're growing, especially I still scan. When I'm here, maybe, like, I'm not gonna be scanning, where maybe 2 patients less than I would have if I wasn't a supervisor. I fully scan, and I think that, A, you wanna keep up your skills and everything, but also you are a person, and you wanna do this because you wanna improve it. You gotta go with a goal of wanting to improve the community in general because you believe that you can make the difference. Because someone else tomorrow can come and take that $2 an hour and be awful, and you have to consider that also. If you believe in yourself and you think you can do it, keep pushing, and you might get an opportunity in that role because that will be in your resume somewhere else, and they will pay you more. And it's just we're in a reality where, you know, pay is important.
Right.
We live in a place where it's hard. If you don't get paid well, it's hard to live and have that work-life balance because you always wanna work because you have to make money. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle, but you will again, it's finding the time and knowing that it's temporary and building yourself, and it's gonna get better. Because right now, there's a reason why I'm in the same place for 12 years. I'm happy in my role, with my pay, and with everything. So
No, it's so important. I think, when considering moving into that leadership role, like you say, that compensation isn't everything. It is important, but it's not everything. And that the place where you work is just so, so important. I think sometimes, especially newer clinicians, don't realize how important the practice that they're part of is. You don't have to marry the practice, you can move. But you choose to stay and where you're spending and investing your time, even though there's a compensation, it's an investment of your talent is so important to not be at the wrong place and to find people like the doctor who really encouraged you and facilitated for you to move up. I've heard similar stories, and it's so important, to have that sort of ladder provided by other people who are in your field, right? And to have that mentorship as well. So, so key. Now that you're in the leadership role, based on your experience as a supervisor of 3 locations, which I'm sure is a lot of work with 12 providers, what advice would you give to others who are stepping into leadership roles in sonography? They're starting out. What's some of like the key lessons you learned early on that you're like, man, yeah, I'd avoid that if I had to start again?
right. I think, I'll start with the positive notes of remembering what you were before a supervisor. As a supervisor, I think it's so important to remember how it was for you. That's why I scan, and I know a lot of supervisors don't. I scan, I think, taking off of the pressure of your department is very important. Just, giving them time to decompress and do those things also. Also, every sonographer who starts with me, I let them know that I sucked with doing a lot of stuff too. And it's okay if you can't find something, and it's okay if you don't know how to do this. Please get me because I needed this help too. So just giving them that level of comfort where they're not like, "Oh my god, am I going to call the supervisor now?" And no, it's totally fine. Just being that just leveled, just like knowing that you're there and it's we're one team. And this is why I was mentioning like the whole favoritism and like I try to give them the work balance to every single one of them. Some of them I worked for 8 years and some of them I'm only working with them for like a year, and I everyone gets treated the same in the work environment, meaning at the 15th of the month, just 2 days ago, I created a schedule for August and I reach out to all my sonographers and I'm like, any days off, any vacations. I don't wait for them to approach because I want them to know that it's okay. We are
Right.
in a team. We're not in need of anybody. We can make this happen where if you need a day off, you can take it. And not just practicing and being a role model that I have good work life balance, just showing it that it's okay and it's giving them the approval because that will make them stay. That will make them happy if they have that balance. And even when it has to do, we have a group chat. If I'm trying to communicate something, if I caught something, if someone, I make it general. I'm not going to make it specific. The person that this is addressing to, they know it. And I don't need to be like, you did this or you did that. Like, hey guys, general rule, make sure you scan, the right side also, or the left side also when you're doing a new OB. Don't forget, it's not just about the heartbeat, it's also this and that. Or make sure you give this patient extra pictures when she comes for her first ultrasound, not because everybody's not bringing pictures, but because I had a complaint that someone just gave one picture and that patient really wanted more. They deserve it. Why not? I also always think that when I see, sonographers not giving enough or not doing enough, or this is a part of their experience, right? And it's just something that I will reach out and I will say, make sure you give pictures. Don't forget, just something general, not something specific. And I think as a supervisor, you don't want to let anybody feel less or feel in a certain mood. There's nothing like carrying on the rest of the day thinking someone is upset with you, or it's never like that. We all have opportunities to grow, and me too. And if anything, they know that they can come to me and request anything.
That open door policy that you describe is so important too, right? Especially when managers are thinking of retention. Of course, we have a shortage, is the truth. In many clinical areas, sonography is no different. So, as a manager, that's a concern, right? It's like, okay, I want to retain the talent which I have. And what you described, having that open door policy, making them comfortable with the supervisor is, of course, a big factor leading into people saying, yes, I do want to stay here. I want to work here. I want to grow with this practice.
Right. Right.
Right. So to wrap up, everyone remembers what it was like to be new. I know you touched a little bit on that. You touched on how it was hard at first, especially the hospital life, right? When you're just fresh out of school and you're starting there. So what's one lesson you've learned that you wish you could share with every new sonographer starting out? I'm sure you share it perhaps with some who didn't start at your practice.
I think to never be afraid that you're still learning, like to admit that you're still learning. I always feel like you have to be a lifelong learner in this career because things always change. We were just talking about it, ACOG updated this and this regarding, fluid of the pregnancy and like things like that, that it's just like there's always room to grow and there's always a chance to learn more. You're not going to know everything when you start. That's the most important thing. You're gonna know something looks funky, and that's all that's important really in reality because we always have someone to back us up, right? For even if you're working independently, they can be sent to maternal fetal medicine to follow up. There's always someone that can back you up with your knowledge and with your skill. And just to give yourself grace in this period of time of learning and starting. No one knew what they're doing in the beginning. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody just didn't know what they're doing in the beginning. And just having that thought and lead with it's okay to give yourself grace and not judge yourself because so many sonographers have a hard time with that in the beginning. And it's okay to not know everything. And if you need to brush up on something, open up the book. I still have books here. I sometimes I'm like, wait, I don't remember seeing this, and I flip through thing. It's okay. It's normal and it's fine. So that's really the main main points here.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me on the show today to share your insights. I think to a lot of our audience, it's a really inspiring episode to hear just how much one sonographer can do using even online platforms to share their expertise and really advocate for the field. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Scoop on Ultrasound. Subscribe today to be notified when new episodes are released, and visit our website, us.edm-imaging.com, to learn more about who we are and what we do.